L'emergenza ha messo in pausa le nostre vite. Insieme però abbiamo reagito, senza rimanere con le mani in mano. Abbiamo trasformato le nostre case in ristoranti, uffici, cinema, parchi gioco, avvicinando chi era lontano, rendendo ordinario lo straordinario, la creatività un patrimonio comune e i nostri balconi un solo grande palcoscenico. Ma ora non è il momento di restare immobili, perché anche con l'autoferma torna a circolare la salute. Noi di Reale Mutua ai nostri soci RC Auto riconosciamo al rinnovo uno sconto di 6 mesi su una nuova polizza salute con copertura Covid-19, oppure una riduzione del premio RC Auto pari a un mese di quello in scadenza. Ripartiamo con una marcia in più, la nostra. Per maggiori informazioni chiedi al tuo agente o scopri di più su realemutua.it. Reale Mutua, together more.
It's good to see you again after all these years. But as I told you before, although not face to face, but only on a computer screen. But first of all, I'd like to give our audience a brief outline of Quichotte, your latest novel. Now, Quichotte tells the story of a traveling salesman, a pharmaceutical salesman named Ismail Smile, who was born in India, but who lives in the United States. Now, Smile sets off across America to win the heart of a TV star, a talk show host named Salma R, who was born in India. She was a Bollywood star. Smile sent love letters to her under the pen name Quichotte. Quichotte is the title of the opera by Massenet. Quichotte is French. In Italian, we say Quichotte, Quixote in English. But anyway, having sent all those letters, he hopes to prove himself worthy of a hand, thanks to the challenges he will overcome during his journey. And just as Cervantes' Hidalgo lost his mind after reading too many chivalric novels, so Smile said is very stupefied by trash TV. I quote, the destructive, mind-numbing junk culture of his time. But when we get to chapter 2, we discover that Smile's request is a story within a story, written by a writer of Indian origin who had written 8 spy novels under the name of Sam Duchamp. So we have a writer, Salman Rushdie, inventing a writer, Sam Duchamp, inventing a character named Smile. This is what critics call metafiction. But anyway, it's something you haven't done in your previous 13 novels. Why did you make that choice? Was it something you've had in mind for a long time or a recent decision?
First, let me say I'm very disappointed not to be with you in person, because I was looking forward to it, and I was looking forward especially to Torino, where I have many happy memories. Some of which were with you.
Yes, 1999.
Yes, and I know it's getting to be a long time ago, but we look exactly the same. But as far as the what you call the metafictional storyline, it really wasn't my plan at all. I had, when I started to write the book, I had only the storyline that you've described of this foolish salesman falling in love with this TV star who is clearly completely out of his league, and deciding to set off across America to win her hand, and absolutely convinced that he will do so, that love will find a way, which is a kind of impossibility. And I thought that's the story, that I will send this character across the country, and he will have adventures which tell us something about the state of the country, and about the state of himself. And eventually, he will come into contact with this glorious lady, and what happens will happen. And I thought that's it, and then I found myself one day beginning to write this other narrative, and to tell you the truth, I always kind of disapproved of metafiction. You know, I always thought, I don't like books in which writers write books about writers writing books about writers, you know. and then I found myself doing it. And I was for a while, I was quite suspicious of it. I thought, I'm not sure that this has a place in the story. And I thought, okay, now that it's showed up, I'm going to explore it and see what there is here. But I gave myself permission to remove it completely from the book and say, you know, I don't want it there. And then I began to like it. You know, I began to think that in a way, these two storylines, these two characters and their lives illuminate each other. You know, from each story we learn something about the other story. You know, and so it becomes another way of telling the story. You know, the fictional author has problems of his own. He has problems of, you know, he's worried about getting older and death, and he's worried. He has difficult relationships with a sister and with a child, and versions of that are present in the story he's trying to create. You know, and so I thought, in a way, it tells us something about the nature of art. You know, about how the personal experiences of an artist can be transformed into the work. You know, they're not exactly the same, and that metamorphosis is the creative act. You know, and so in the end, I thought, you know, I like this, and as you said, it's something I haven't done before, and I'm always looking for things I haven't done before. So,
Yes.
so I thought it was valuable in the end.
Yes, as far as I can say, it works. It works. Now, Sam, Salma, Smile are from India. They are migrants. In your novel, I don't remember at which point, we read that migration has a great positive value. Migrants are like the seeds scattered on the earth, and from them, a new life will arise. By the way, is that an echo of Shelley's Ode to the West Wind?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, might be, yes. I wasn't really thinking about Shelley, but it's a great poem. And
because the seeds.
What I think is, in particular, in a novel about the United States, it's almost an obvious thing to say, because everybody here, every single person here, apart from the original inhabitants, is here because of an act of migration. You know, sometimes a voluntary migration, like the Pilgrim Fathers, sometimes an involuntary one, like the history of slavery. But everybody here is the descendant of people who arrived. You know, so this is a country created by immigrants. You know, and that's what that statue is doing in the harbor. You know, that's what the statue says. It welcomes people from other parts of the world. And now we live in a moment at which there's a different attitude.
Well, yes. This is the question I'd like to ask you, because as you know, some Italian politicians and several European leaders, not to speak of Donald Bloody Trump, have a different idea about migration. Things have changed utterly in the last few years. Now, do you think that the situation has got irremediably worse?
I hope not. You know, I hope not. I mean, I think, you know, it's a complicated thing, because obviously countries have a right to determine how many people can come in and so on and so on. I mean, there's nobody would say that all countries must just have open borders. You know, but first of all, I'm biased because I'm a migrant. You know, I mean, in fact, I'm a double migrant. That I first from India to the UK, and then from the UK for the last 20 years to America. So I've always been very interested in the fact that we live in a moment in which this phenomenon of migration is more possible than it ever was before. You know, partly because of modes of transportation and so on, Sometimes it's economic necessity, sometimes people come as refugees, but people have moved across the world more than ever in human history before. And it somewhat changes the nature of the world. I think, if we look at our cities, New York today is the streets are deserted, but in normal circumstances, if you look at the city of New York, it is made by people from everywhere in the world, and the reality of our life now is like that. And so for me, it's been primarily, a thing to celebrate, not to fear.
Yeah. Well, some years ago, I've written a short history of English literature. And the last chapter is dedicated to the literatures in English. Talking about you, I've written that Rushdie is a tightrope walker of narrative art. And he's a master of humor, with a quasi Joycean delight in plays on words, an often ferocious sense of irony, and an extraordinary ability to capture the comical grotesque within the tragic. A master of humor. Has it been difficult to keep on exercising this virtue of yours in the last 30 years?
I think it's just how it comes out with me. I don't like to read books which are completely lacking in humor, and I don't like to write them, and one of the things I've been happiest about with this novel is that many people who have been reading it now, it's been out in English since last September, and so it has a lot of readers by now, and many people have said to me that they think it's my funniest book. It started with my publishers and literary agents said it to me. And happily, the reading public seems to have agreed. So, I think comedy is the hardest thing. It's much easier to make people cry than to make people laugh.
Oh yes, of course. Yes, and funny it is. But Quichotte has also been defined as literary hall of mirrors. Alice in Wonderland, Moby Dick, Ionesco's Rhinoceros, but also, am I right, Marlowe's Foster's with the Wicked Angel and the Cherub of Light on Sam's left and right shoulders.
Yes,
and also, is it so? And also, of course, Pinocchio. Now, Pinocchio's father, Geppetto, creates his son, Pinocchio, out of a tree trunk. Smile has the Persids grant his wish of having a son during a meteor shower in August at 11:11 p.m. And the longed-for son materializes in his car's passenger seat. Is the relationship between father and son one of the main themes of the novel? Because family certainly is. Father and son?
No, I really wanted to write about love, which is not necessarily romantic love. I think in the novel as a form, there is a great interest in romantic love. But I wanted to write about these other kinds of deep connection between parents and children, between brothers and sisters, and to examine how they can operate, how they can go wrong, whether it's possible to heal them. That really is very close to the heart of the book. And that's why my Sancho, is a child rather than a sidekick.
Yes.
He's not like Cervantes' Sancho Panza, because Sancho Panza is, first of all, adult, secondly, real, and thirdly, very down to earth and matter of fact. Whereas mine is as you said, is a kind of creation of the father's desperate need for a child, and arrives as a phantom, and then becomes very determined to be real. And yes, I think for Italian readers, it's quite deliberate that the connection to Pinocchio is actually greater than the connection to Cervantes, even to the extent that he acquires a talking cricket.
Yes, yes,
a talking cricket in Italian.
and also the Blue Fairy.
And the Blue Fairy, yes, which are the stories, which are storylines taken from obviously from Carlo Collodi's Pinocchio.
Yes.
And I was much more interested, I have to say, in Carlo Collodi's Pinocchio than in Walt Disney's Pinocchio. And so, I mean, I think that the character in my book has a relationship to the novel of Pinocchio much more than to the movie of Pinocchio.
Yes, well, yes, and I can understand why. Just one thing that puzzles me. Well, the name of the talk show host, her name is Sama R, just R, the initial.
Mm.
Now, your name is Salman, and R is the first letter of your surname.
Yeah.
Is it a funny coincidence, a sort of joke, or you did it on purpose?
Well, part of it is a joke because, writers nowadays are always asked, in this book, who is the autobiographical character? It's a very frequent question. And so I thought, if I give almost my name to this character, the character is a woman, not a man, and she has, in some ways, much greater fame and glory and beauty and wealth than me, but she also has deep trouble in her life, that she is
She's bipolar.
Yes, she's bipolar. She has a history of sexual abuse in her family. Has a drug addiction, etc. And if I could say, well, yes, that's me, it would be a way of deflecting the question. That's why the name. But also, I felt that really of these three central characters, of the Quichotte and Sancho and Salma, in a way, I thought of all of them as aspects of myself, and I wanted to recognize that in some way. I mean, the Quichotte character, my friends, if you ask them, will tell you that they make fun of me for being too optimistic. That even when there is no reason for optimism, I by nature I'm optimistic and not despairing. And so I thought with my character that I would take that characteristic that people make fun of with me, and I would magnify it and send this ludicrously optimistic person on this crazy quest for the hand of this woman he has no chance of succeeding with, and to contrast that optimism with the state of a country which is perhaps not at its most optimistic moment,
Not at all.
And I remembered, Voltaire's novel Candide, which does something similar. It sends a kind of innocent person out into a very darkening world. And actually the subtitle of Candide, you remember, is L'Optimisme,
Yes.
And so there's behind this novel, there's a lot of literature behind this novel. I mean, obviously the most obvious thing is Cervantes, but there's also Pinocchio, and there's also Candide, and there's also Ionesco. I've tried to use everything I know about literature in order to try and talk about the world that we're in.
Well, just one last question. It's not a serious one, because you've been living in the States for the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still follow the Premier League football? Because I remember you told me when we met, you told me, that was 20 years ago, that you were a Tottenham Hotspur's fan.
Mm-hmm.
And you still follow in English football?
To be a Tottenham Hotspur fan is my personal tragedy. In the year that I first came to England as a not even 14-year-old schoolboy, that year, Tottenham Hotspur had the greatest team and they won the championship. From that day to this, now almost 60 years later, they have never won it again. So yeah, I mean, I follow all the sports of the countries that I come from. So because in India, the incredible obsession is with cricket, I still follow cricket. you know, and yes, I still follow the, well, there isn't a Premier League to follow right now, but I'm still interested in what happens in English football. And here in America now, I mean, I've now become quite a considerable baseball fan. So I go to, I mean, in the days when one could go to watch games, I would go to Yankee Stadium quite regularly. And one of the real sadnesses of this right now is the baseball season, you know, and I always loved it because particularly to write, when you're at home and you write all day, and at the end of the day you're tired, the nicest thing to do was to fall in front of the television and turn on the baseball game. And it was a way of turning your head off. And now suddenly there's no baseball to watch. And that's yeah, so I'm a sports fan. Thank you so much for this conversation. I'm happy to have been able to, at least in this virtual way, to be present in Torino, which I love and which I've been to many times and which has been very kind to me as a writer over the years, honoring me in various ways. So I was really looking forward to coming and being with you all. So, I mean, I'm in New York, you're over there, but we're at least for this moment together, and thank you very much.
Thanks to you.